Welcome to this tutorial on using NoodleTools for academic citations. We'll start out with a short discussion about key points that students often misunderstand about citations. After that, you'll activate your own NoodleTools account and practice creating and managing citations, notes, and starting a formatted paper. First, let me ask you, what is your definition of an academic citation? I find that students often have a hard time with this question, and the difficulty that they have in verbalizing what a citation is reflected in the frequent problems we see when they have to create citations and interpret source material. So please take 30 seconds to jot down a definition of what a citation is in a way that you think would be clear for students. Okay, that's less than 30 seconds, but maybe you're getting bored. The definition that I use is this. A citation is all the information you need to give a complete description of the source of a fact, idea, or quotation, and to be able to find that source again. Maybe your definition is even clearer than mine, but the main idea I want students to understand is that a citation is, first and foremost, a description. So let's look at the key elements of a citation. We tell students that a citation can include as many of these things as possible, depending on the citation style. The author, title, physical or electronic place of publication, the publisher, the publication date, the date you found it, and the web address. I personally think that the author and the publisher are the most vital pieces of information. The reasons for this are obvious to teachers, but not to students. Clearly, we are worried about students using ideas that are created by reliable people and distributed by authoritative organizations. I can't tell you how often I see students who were allowed in the past to use only a web address as a citation. Considering that a URL has the potential for carrying absolutely no valuable information about a source, this is one of the worst possible single elements to rely on. The most common problem I see when students conduct their own research is that they don't pay enough attention to what the source was, who wrote it, and where it was published, and that's because they sometimes misunderstand why we cite sources. When I ask students to explain why they need to cite sources, they invariably state that it's to avoid plagiarism and so avoid punishment. The real reason to cite sources is to make what they're writing worth reading, to support the validity of their information by showing that it came from reliable, authoritative people and organizations. We can't remind them of this enough. At the high school level, the ability to use citation software is part of the reason that students find it easy to ignore the need to carefully consider the research value of the sources they find. Of course, there are obvious advantages to using an electronic citation creation program. It can prompt you with a checklist of all the parts you need to include, and include help functions too. Look at this example from NoodleTools. It's got all the parts that you need, and includes a hint up here reminding you to consider whether or not the article that you're going to cite that you say is from a newspaper is actually the same as the print newspaper, or if it might have changed in the online published version. It can also take care of the arcane formatting and style rules like word order, punctuation, capitals, italics, quotes, and all that. It can sometimes even find complete citation information stored online for a source, especially for print books and journal articles, with just a little guiding information. EasyBib, for example, will try to find online information for sources like a web page when you enter the URL, or a book when you enter the title or international identification number, or ISBN, as in this case here. It can also keep a bibliography list for use in your paper. It might also allow you to create notes and link the citations to the notes. It might create the format for a paper and manage notes and citations in the paper. But there are some clear disadvantages. In EasyBib, for example, students can too easily just insert the URL for a journal article using the parameters for a website. And the results are really inaccurate. It can allow students to create completely inaccurate automatic citations by inserting URLs from web materials. Look what happens, for example, when we just plug in this URL from an online newspaper into EasyBib. The program was able to understand some of the elements, but look at what it got wrong. It calls the title of the website "Summer Squash Makes Flavorful Pasta Dish." It wasn't able to recognize that it was a newspaper. It wasn't able to recognize the author or the name of the newspaper or the name of the website. Even worse, look what happens when students misunderstand how to create citations and plug in the URL of an article from an online database. Here we have an article that's from one of our subscription databases, ERIC, belonging to the EBSCO suite. If we were to copy and paste this URL in the Cite, it tells us that it can do it and asks us to continue to the final step, but really pulls out no useful information. The citation that's created is basically gibberish, and it has no value at all. The real problem with automatic citations is that first, students have no opportunity to think about what they've found. Is their source an online article, a web page, a blog, or a journal article? And second, and just as importantly, they have no reason to even address who wrote the information or where it's coming from. When they're forced to make choices along the way of stating the who, what, and where, there's at least an opportunity to reflect on these things. Now, NoodleTools, on the other hand, while maybe not as powerful or as complete as EasyBib, does not create completely automatic citations from URLs, and it forces students to make choices along the way while giving hints that can be very helpful to them. So, what problems have you noticed when students need to cite their sources?